Chapter 3. The next few hours were a blur. The guys swarming around him, Coach B helping him off the field, the long wait at the emergency room, moms and dads, worried faces. But in the end, Lucas was fine. He just had a concussion. Sure, it was worse than the concussion he had gotten during the playoffs last season and the one before that during the summer after 4th grade, but he knew that he would get better if he took it easy, just like the other times. That night, Dad came into Lucas's room to check on him. "Feeling okay?" "Yes, I'm good, Dad," Lucas said. He's really feeling much better. What killed him was knowing he'd be off the field for 12 days. He already missed the guys. Looking up at Dad, Lucas saw a face almost exactly like his own. They even had the same specks of green in their brown eyes. "You need anything?" Dad asked. "I'm good," Lucas said again. Lucas stayed very still, hoping Dad would stick around and talk, but Dad stood up. He leaned over and kissed Lucas on the forehead, and he was gone. Lucas's heart sank a little. There had been a time when Dad would have plopped himself on Lucas's bed and announced his plan for the next adventure. Some nights, back then, they'd wait for Mom to fall asleep so they could sneak down to the basement and work on the Seagrave. Dad and Lucas had been a team of 2. But then came the warehouse fire. 2 years had passed since it happened, but the memories were still sharp. The doorbell ringing in the middle of the night, the Chief and Uncle Benny standing in the doorway still stinking of smoke, Mom's tears, and later the sight of Dad wrapped in bandages, his face white with pain. Lucas had always known that his dad's job was dangerous. Sometimes Dad would bring Lucas to the firehouse on his days off. Lucas would help with the chores, washing the truck, cooking lunches, checking the hoses. But what he loved most was sitting around the big, round kitchen table, listening to the guys talk about the fires they'd fought. To Lucas, they were superheroes. They ran into buildings filled with blazing orange flames and choking black smoke. They used metal spears to smash windows, rip out walls, and bash through the doors. They carried people down oven hot stairwells and dangled from ropes hundreds of feet in the air. The fires they tamed were more evil and more ferocious than any video game villain or movie monster. But it wasn't until the warehouse fire that Lucas understood what a fire could do to a real man, a man like his dad. Dad never talked about what happened to him inside that warehouse. All Lucas knew was that 4 firemen died and Dad was badly burnt in an explosion. Even after all this time, the scars on Dad's arms were bright red and lumpy, like raw hamburger. But the burns weren't the worst of what that fire did to Dad. It took away his easy smile and blooming laugh. It turned him quiet. Some days Dad barely talked at all. He'd get this look in his eyes, like his mind was somewhere else, probably sifting through the ashes in that warehouse. Lucas stopped asking when they got back to that model. Lucas stopped asking when they get back to the model of the Seagrave, which was half finished and covered with dust in the basement. And when the memories of that night came back, or he started worrying that Dad would never be himself again, he closed his eyes and imagined himself on a football field, surrounded by the guys, their voices calling out his name as he made one of the famous catches. Chapter 4. Monday, September 10th, 2001. Monday came, the last day before Lucas could be allowed back on the field. He'd been crossing out the days on his calendar, counting down. Mom picked him up early from school for a doctor's appointment. She wanted him checked out before he was cleared to play. "I'm fine," Lucas said. "Can't you tell?" Lucas lifted his arm and flexed his bicep. Mom laughed. You look incredible. Mom had decided to take him to a new doctor. I hear he's the best, she said. We were lucky he could fit you in. His name was Dr. Barrett. With his blonde crew cut and huge shoulders, he looked more like a linebacker than a doctor. Dr. Barrett brought Lucas into the exam room and checked him over. Looking in his eyes, listening to his heart and lungs, he asked him to walk across the room with one foot in front of the other. Lucas was sure he passed all the tests. After the exam, Dr. Barrett waved Mom and Lucas back into his office. The wall was covered with framed diplomas and pictures of football players. Lucas looked at a photo of a rough-looking man in a Denver Broncos uniform. That's Dan Brock, Dr. Barrett said. Have you heard of him? The name was familiar, but Lucas didn't know why. He was All-American at the University of Wisconsin, then a third-round pick for the NFL. Dr. Barrett pointed to the next photo in the row, a big smiling man with a busted-up nose and chubby baby cheeks. That's Tyrus Vallone. He said he was a star tackle at Florida State, and then he played 10 years for Green Bay. There were 3 other pictures on the wall. It was only the last one that Lucas recognized. Is that Stan Walsh? Isn't he? He was dead. He had died a few months ago. Uncle Benny had been upset about it. He had played against Stan Walsh when he was a college player. Dr. Barrett nodded, seeing that Lucas knew about Stan Walsh. He had just turned 40. The doctor said, he had the same kind of brain disease you see in men in their 80s. Dr. Barrett pointed up at the wall. At all of the players, all of those men are dead, he said. They donated their brains to our lab so we could study them. They all died because of concussions. A chill ran up and down Lucas's spine. He looked at Mom. Her eyes were wide with shock. We used to think concussions were like sprained ankles, Dr. Barrett said. You get dinged, you let it heal, and you're good to go. But now we know that too many concussions can actually change the brain. How many concussions is too many? Mom asked. Lucas held his breath. I would say that in an 11-year-old boy, 3 concussions in 2 years is too many. The room was suddenly quiet. Lucas could feel the eyes of those football players looking down on him. I can stay out another week, Lucas said. It would be torture, but he'd be back in time for the first game. I'm sorry, Lucas, Dr. Barrett said, but what I'm suggesting is that you never play football again. All night, Lucas argued and begged. He had a million reasons why that doctor was wrong, and he told Mom and Dad practically every single one. When that didn't work, he offered to sit out for 2 more weeks, then 3. Just please, don't make me quit. Finally, Dad put his hands on Lucas's shoulder. Lucas, Dad said in a soft voice, football is a game. I know you love it, but it is just a game. A game? Of course Lucas knew that, but that game was the most important thing in his life. What would he do without his team? That night he laid awake in bed for hours thinking. It was past midnight when he realized that what he needed to do. He had to see Uncle Benny. Before Mom and Dad talked to Coach, before it was too late, Dad left early the next morning. He was teaching a class at The Rock, the firefighter training school, across a bridge from Manhattan. On Randall's Island, Mom dropped Lucas off at the bus stop on her way to work. The minute her car disappeared, Lucas sprinted back home. He grabbed his bike and pedaled as fast as he could to the train station. He caught the 7:17 with 1 minute to spare. Lucas knew how wrong this was. To skip school, to sneak into the city without Mom and Dad knowing? But right then, none of that mattered. He had to see Uncle Benny. Somehow, Uncle Benny would make this right. And that is the end of chapter 4. Thanks for listening.